Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. It looks to me like we've had Bob Hope here in journalistic clothes. I had a choice this morning between going to a bloody mess... or going out on this beautiful spring morning and playing golf, and I went out to play golf. And I thought it was a good choice. As I looked around the city coming in last night, I was reminded again of how much things have changed since I first saw Washington. I first saw Washington in December of 1928. And as I came out of the Union Station, there were still temporary wooden buildings built during World War I between Union Station and the Capitol. And then I heard the story of my future father-in-law when he first came to Washington that same year as a result of having been appointed to the new Federal Radio Commission by President Coolidge. He was from the Rocky Mountain country, and in those days even a West Point cadet was a celebrity out there. So he thought he ought to go into the White House and thank the president for his appointment. And it remains unchanged, and it will not change, because I made a commitment, and I'm not going to start breaking my commitments at this age. In any event, knowing an editor's dedication to accuracy, I quickly discounted any thought you had in mind any other role for me than as governor of Michigan. Now, I'd like to take this opportunity to remind you of a story about the power of the press and the problems of a state, and I'd like to make and social problems today that can be solved that way. In each instance, if you will analyze their causes and their cures, the thing needed above all else is the willingness of individuals to involve themselves in helping other individuals who need help, and that's not a governmental function. Third, more effective local and state programs. Fourth, prudent control of expenditures. Fifth, proper investment in public services for people. The new Michigan story deserves telling. The press of this nation covered the old Michigan story thoroughly. I encourage you to cover the new Michigan story just as thoroughly. I happen to think you owe it to us. I urge you to send your writers and your photographers into Michigan. Talk to Michigan people. See for yourselves what's going on. Convince yourselves and then tell your readers. 4 years ago, Michigan was ashamed to be an example for the country. Today, we're again proud to be an example. 2 years ago, people in Michigan were arguing about who was responsible for the mess we're in. Today, we're beginning to argue about who's responsible for all our progress. It's great to be just a little part of that argument, and I urge you to tell your readers about it. It has national significance because we have the dilemma that we have not yet devised the means by which we can deal with basic problems and basic issues before they become national emergencies and national crises. Now, Churchill has called attention to the same dilemma in our free societies. He experienced it ahead of World War II. I was interested in reading Abraham Lincoln's great pre-presidency speech, the Divided House speech, recently, to see that he said in those days, when the trends must have been clear, when the issues must have been clear, they'd been debating them for a long time, compromising them, when he said that these issues would not be settled until the nation had passed through a great crisis. Now, I've found already from my brief experience that one of the deficiencies in our free society is that you can't get public support, needed public support, and needed legislative support for fundamental action except in the midst of a crisis or an emergency. And unless we create the influences within this country, and these influences are being cut down and destroyed by the Supreme Court and others, unless we reestablish it, the influences in this country that are necessary to achieve a rebirth of what this nation stands for, we will be witnesses to the decline and fall of the American Republic, as May Craig says we are witnessing at the present time. Now, I believe this nation is headed towards a crisis. And I believe the great opportunity that the Republican Party has is to state the issues and the problems of this day and age in this great country clearly. I think the people are yearning for it, and to state the solutions. And I think this is infinitely more important than who's the candidate. Because I think until a national party, political party comes along that will state those issues clearly and face them and go out to do what we have not yet been able to do in a free society, namely, change the trends before they create a crisis, we will ultimately be faced with the necessity of going through a crisis, and what will then happen to us in the free world, I don't know. Thank you very much. Yes, I do. As a matter of fact, I was in Washington when my golfing companion, Mariner Eccles, had the job of selling this country on the compensatory theory. That was the Lord Keynes' financial concept. And he did, importantly, sell that idea. And, of course, that idea was that you'd spend less in good times so you'd have a surplus to use in bad times and help to balance out. Well, the only trouble is that ever since then, there's never been anything but a poor year. The politicians can't see the difference between good year. The average politician can't see the difference between a good year and a bad year. Those who were undertaking to upset the Diems, who were in liaison relationship, at least with the communists, indicated to some of our reporters ahead of time that they expected to get the heads of the Diems on a United States platter. Well, then, as I understand it, there were certain experiences over there that kind of upset the U.S. press people and representatives. And these connivers began to arrange to have some of these Buddhist priest immolations at times and locations where these free nation press people and photographers would see them and make maximum use of them. Of course, they'd put their interpretation on them. And in 6 months, there were 6 immolations, highly publicized throughout the free world. Not just this country, but Britain, too. And this ultimately played a tremendous part in the removal of the Diems. Now, I don't know whether the Diems should have been removed or not. But these same American correspondents who spent considerable time over there told me there were more immolations in the 6 weeks following the coup than there were in the 6 months before. And I began to watch in the press. And I saw 2 subsequently that were treated with about that much space, because this is an old thing that's been going on in that country for a long time. Now, sure, Mrs. Diem said some things that were shocking. And boy, we played them to the hilt. Because, yes, I think that in the decisions with respect to separation of church and state that they're going too far. I don't disagree with the New York prayer case decision, but I do disagree with the general tenor that is apparently coming into their decisions, indicating support for what is a growing position in this country. At the Constitutional Convention in Michigan, we had a real battle over whether to include in the new Constitution language that was written into our first Constitution and that originally came from the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. The Northwest Ordinance of 1787 said, religion...
I'm delighted to be here with you today, for I do have past ties with the press. My first activity in journalism was with the weekly paper in my hometown of Skowhegan, Maine. I did everything from society reporting to advertising and being circulation manager. Being a United States Senator, the reason. You and I know that the real reason is because I am, to put it politely, politically unique. But let's be a bit more earthy about it and just say it is because I am a political oddity. That Barry Goldwater is running for president because he wants to be promoted from Major General in the Air Force Reserve to the higher position of Commander-in-Chief of all armed services, or would like to have his 99th Air Reserve Squadron meetings in the White House. No one infers that Nelson Rockefeller is running for president because he needs the pay. No one infers that Cabot Lodge is running for president because getting elected president is the best face-saving way of getting out of the sticky Vietnam assignment that he has. No one infers that Bill Scranton is running for president because he wants to be promoted from Major in the Air Force Reserve to the higher rank of Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Services and take command of his former 99th Reserve Squadron away from Barry Goldwater. No one infers that George Romney is running for president because Sophie Williams or Walter Reuther might be running for governor of Michigan. No one infers that Dick Nixon is running for president because he wants to have another testimonial meeting to praise the press. And express his deep gratitude for its favored treatment of him. No one infers that Harold Stassen is running for president just because he can't break the habit. Instead, no one doubts that each of these men would really like to be president. But they really can't believe that that woman really wants to be president. So they make allegations that she has ulterior motives. In New Hampshire, the Rockefeller forces charged that Margaret Chase Smith was in that primary just as a front for Barry Goldwater. Now let me repeat that one. In New Hampshire, the Rockefeller forces charged that Margaret Chase Smith was in that primary just as a front for Barry Goldwater. Now, some of you are smiling, but they were serious. Ask Barry now if he thinks I have been a front for him in any primary. Chances are that he will say yes, but not the way the Rockefeller forces claim. For when they say a front, they say two words. And when Barry says a front, he says only one word, A-F-F-R-O-N-T, sometimes spelled I-L-L-I-N-O-I-S. Barry has been a great. We'll learn lessons from the old master Harold. I want to take advantage of this occasion today and say something that I won't be able to say for about a few days more. As of now, I have received more votes for president than President Johnson or anyone else except Barry Goldwater. And interestingly enough, this transcends any favoritism from New England. But I'll admit my days are numbered, for the polls in Oregon indicate that the New England favoritism will take root there. I have to face reality like last week, when a very nice young woman at the National Conference of the Republican Women told me that I was wonderful, but that I was too pretty to be president. Perhaps as a woman I should rather be pretty than president. Sounds like an ad for a face-rejuvenating cosmetic, or should I say a face-saving cosmetic ad. If the public opinion polls dictate the selection of the Democratic vice presidential nominee, if the delegates, rather than the presidential nominee, dictate the selection of the Democratic vice presidential nominee, then the 1960 Kennedy-Johnson ticket will be reversed in 1964 with a Johnson-Kennedy ticket. Robert Kennedy, that is. The second place on the Republican ticket could then well be filled according to the observations of the last Republican vice president and the last Republican president. For Richard Nixon has publicly announced his willingness to make the supreme sacrifice for his party and accept the vice presidential spot. And Dwight D. Eisenhower has publicly given his endorsement to this possibility in his noting Dick Nixon's truly greatness in being willing to accept the number 2 spot. The only thing that troubles me about this, so as to prevent interrupting Dick's travels abroad. Certainly this would not only be more accommodating to Cabot and Dick, but it would be more accommodating to the voters, because then they would have a real opportunity to cast protest votes with their write-ins, than to be faced with the dull and distasteful alternative of having to vote 4 names on the ballot. When you think about it, Cabot and Dick, with their write-in non-candidates, might have come up with a magic protest formula for winning. Now for a note of seriousness in closing. I have departed from my usual policy of serious and frank talk because you have received enough serious talk already from the presidential candidates you take seriously. And at this point, you are certainly entitled to something lighter from the presidential candidate that some of your publications refuse to take seriously. the first woman to enter a presidential preferential primary. This oddity prompts the speculation game of just what am I up to? Just why am I doing it? What do I have up my sleeve? What do I have in my bonnet? The simplest answer is the plain, unvarnished truth. But because it is so simple, it fails to satisfy the curiosity. In fact, it is so simple that it seems to increase the curiosity and seems all the more difficult for the curious to believe it.